Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the open mic. I am your host, Rich Ehisen. And if you're a regular visitor, you know this is where I get the chance to talk to some of the world's best writers about their work and the publishing industry and how they do what they do. And I'm really thrilled today. I'm joined by one of the really great, most successful writers in the world today, Lincoln Child, either with his writing partner, Doug Preston, or solo, has put about 30 books on the New York Times bestsellers list over the last few decades and sold around 30 million copies of those books. I don't know what else to say to that, so I'm just going to say welcome, Lincoln. Thank you very much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm good, Rich. Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Well, the honor, believe me, is all mine. Let's jump right in because you've got a new book coming out. You and Doug Preston have a new book. I know, and you've got one, a solo book coming out. We're going to talk about in a little bit as well. The new book coming out in a few weeks. We're recording this in the early January, so this will be out in early February, I believe. And please correct me if I'm wrong. That book is Diablo Mesa. It is the third in the Nora Kelly series, which I absolutely love. I've been anticipating this third edition. Ms. Kelly is Ms. Kelly, make sure I say that clearly, is an archaeologist, and her co-protagonist, FBI agent Corey Swanson. They are really interesting characters because maybe they're more frenemies than friends, or at the very least, reluctant collaborators. And I love the tension. I love the back and forth. Tell me a little bit about the new book and then what inspired this series.
Okay, I'd be happy to. Your feed lagged there for a minute. I don't know if it's your near end or my end, but let me know if you have trouble seeing me or hearing me.
Oh, no, okay. I thank you for letting me know. I didn't notice. No, I didn't lose anything. Do you need me to repeat the question?
No.
Okay, perfect.
The new book, Diablo Mesa, we just learned has gotten a couple of rave reviews. One in Publishers Weekly, and I can't recall what the other one was, but they're both star reviews, and so it's nice to know that we haven't lost our touch completely. It's really important for Doug and I to not rest on our laurels. You know, it would be easy to do, but having a partnership like that, we can test each other and push each other. But the new book is about the Roswell incident, which took place in northern New Mexico, and probably most people who are listening in know about it. It's where the first UFO sightings were supposedly documented. We thought it would be fun to take that story, and since we don't do science fiction, turn it on its head. You know, in the first chapter, Nora Kelly gets the assignment by a billionaire, sort of one of the space billionaires like we have right now, launching all the time, to dig this up. And she says no and gets fired for it. And he hires her on the side. And what they find is, well, I won't give it away, but we made sure she stayed very critical and a bit uncertain through the whole thing. She never drank the Kool-Aid or anything. And so we had a lot of fun with that dynamic of this billionaire, Lucas Tappan, who is so enthusiastic about this, and her saying, wait a minute, there's no such thing as space aliens, you know, I've lived, and it turned out that we had a lot of fun doing it. And it was perfect because Doug Preston lives out in that area, and he's gone over it on horseback again and again, almost killed himself, you know, running out of water and things. And it seemed like a great, you see, you also asked about how the series came into being. And the way that was we had a second series going about this character named Gideon Crew, who was like a foil to Pendergast almost. He was a rascal, he drank too much, a ladies' man, everything that Pendergast was not. But he also had a terminal illness, and his terminal illness would have been magically cured had we got a movie deal for him, but we didn't. So we allowed him to say goodbye to us on his porch off in the desert. But we wanted to do a second series because it really helps keep us on our mettle to have another series going on at the same time as Pendergast, because Pendergast is so gothic and very complicated, baroque, but fun. And we wanted to have a lighter, faster moving, action-oriented series to replace Gideon. So I thought about Nora Kelly, who'd an archaeologist who figured in several earlier books. Why not make her a heroine? And Doug said, fine. But to do that, she had to keep getting in trouble or there'd be no plot. So we thought, let's bring in Corey Swanson, the FBI agent. So the trouble, the problem we face each time is one of them will have an issue, the other one has to help with it, be it a crime or a body. And so as a result, we can play the two women off each other, and they're both very strong characters. And so far we've had a lot of fun doing it.
Oh, and I can tell, and I will tell you, I really do enjoy this series, and I like the fact that they are, like I said, somewhat reluctant collaborators at best. But you referenced, of course, Doug Preston. You guys have had so much success, and this partnership has lasted longer than a lot of marriages. What has made it so successful, do you think, for so long? How do you keep things fresh from book to book and concept to concept as the technologies have changed and everything has changed? How do you keep this professional relationship as vibrant as it clearly is?
That's a very good question, and I'll do my best to answer it in 30 seconds less. When we started out, we never thought we'd be successful. Relic was a complete, just an act of impulse on our part. We were having fun. We hoped it would get published, but we didn't think it would, really. So it was an indulgence. And for the first couple of books, now I have to give you a caveat here because Doug's not here to disagree with me. So this is my version of the story. But that's his fault and his loss too. Anyway, I had just finished a stint in publishing. Yeah, I've been the editor for several years. Sorry.
No problem.
And forgive me.
No problem.
And I was now ready to do something else literary. And so was Doug. He'd worked at the Museum of Natural History for many years, and he was just moving to New Mexico to follow in the footsteps of John McPhee and that guy who wrote Blue Highways. I don't know if you remember that book or not.
Yeah.
And he wanted to write nonfiction New Yorker pieces. That was his goal. Hence the trekking around the desert, et cetera, et cetera. And he regarded these books with me as a mere way to maybe make some money on the side at first. And so I was really the suitor for the first couple of books. I convinced him. Relic came out and he was cursing it and all this crap, that I do on the side. And his wife said, Doug, that's the best thing you've ever written. You should look more closely at that. And it took a few years for him to get the idea that his greatest success would be on his own, out of his head, that requirement. and to come to terms with maybe the two of us in fiction would be as high as we could both get. Now, I hasten to say that in nonfiction, he is peerless. You know, his book, The Monkey God, has sold huge numbers of copies. So he's fantastic in both fiction and nonfiction. But I think he'd be the first to agree that since we've both written solo books and joint books, that together we're just better than some, you know, of our parts. I would never compare us to the Beatles in terms of, you know, talent, but same thing happened with them, you know, when they worked on their solo careers. As far as keeping it fresh, that's actually the easiest part of it, because we do this because we enjoy it. You know, there's so many bad thrillers out there, and so many thrillers that are just formulaic. And we write books that we want to read. You know, I mean, we have certain authors like Michael Crichton, Dennis Lehane, who we really like, and we feel really smart. And the earlier books by Harris, the Lecter books, they're really smart. They fool us. They pull us in, and those are the kind of books that we would like to read, and we do our best to write those. And so they keep us challenged all the time. And if it ever became a chore rather than fun, we stopped doing it, because, you know, we're very aware of the T.S. Eliot's theory of all the works that have gone before being relative to what comes next. So if I write a crappy book, all my previous books are going to be, you know, in its shadow as a result. You know, oh, that Lincoln child, he was good until X came out, and then he just, I'm in mortal fear of that. And so is Doug. And so we're always challenging each other. And that's one nice thing about a partnership is when we talk about chapters, we assign each other a group of chapters. And when his chapters come in, I can be surprised, I can be amused, you know, and I see all over again why this partnership works so well. And if I do something that's lazy, I'm not saying I ever do, but should it ever happen, he would catch me right away and say, Link, these chapters just, they're not working. You know, more needs to happen, or so-and-so. And finally, as to the marriage aspect of it, it is like a marriage in some ways. You know, we kvetch and we, you know, complain, why don't you do all of this? Or, you know, why are you the, but the most important thing is we implicitly believe in each other's judgment. You know, he's my closest thing I have to a best friend outside of my family, and certainly in sort of an intellectual confidant, he's the closest one I have. Person, you know, he can finish my sentences, and vice versa. We can make very, very, very obscure jokes. I know the other one's going to get it, you know, or even if not, we'll appreciate what's explained. And so when he says something to me, I listen to him, because he's proven again and again that he's right, and he has the books and the you know, the reputation to prove it. So you have to check your ego at the door if you want to have a successful relationship like this.
Did you ever have problems, maybe in the beginning, before, you know, you got into this somewhat level of comfort? You know, how did you mesh those styles though, and then how did you handle any conflict? I mean, did you ever find problems with that, or did you ever have a moment where you said, I'm not sure about this? You know, I mean, how did you maneuver all that part of it?
Yes, we did. There were two parts of that. First part was when we started out, I had enjoyed writing as a kid, but when I got into publishing and saw new manuscripts come across my desk every 5 minutes, and most of them were, unfortunately, it's really hard to write a book. You know, for most of what you see is not as good as you'd like. For me, it was like being in a candy store. When I went home at night, the last thing I wanted to do was write, because I read it all day long. So I, at first, did most of the planning and the outlining, and Doug did most of the writing. He writes very fast and very assuredly. And it was so interesting watching my ideas get turned into, and then I started taking out his chapters, rewriting his chapters more and more extensively. And so I say Relic was probably 70% his writing and 30% mine. And I gradually learned how to inject that humor into it and to write these characters. And Doug learned from what I did to his pruning his stuff and rewriting it, how to cut back on certain things. And so what's happened is a very slow progression to us writing roughly half of each book. Doug probably writes still more than I do. I might have one or two more brainstorms than he does along the way, but then again, that's disputable. Certainly I've learned an incredible amount from him. And his own, when I mentioned earlier his how competitive he is with himself, I in no way want to say his such a thing was bad. I think it was good. That hunger really helped us, and it helped him in his solo career and in our joint career. So that was really a learning experience for me. As for after a dark moment in our career, there was one. It was after we'd written Relic. I had wooed Doug to write Mount Dragon by putting together a whole 30-page proposal with maps and first chapters. And then we wrote a sequel to Relic. And at that point, we decided to write a book based very roughly on the Oak Island treasure. And our books had rocketed up, relatively speaking, and then they tanked. They printed way too many copies of Mount Dragon, and so it didn't sell as well as it had hoped. And we were thinking of changing our representation and publisher. And so the opening of Relic was very hard to write. And there came a day that I just unleashed a torrent of foul language at him, because he rewrote me one too many times. And he said, well, I'm glad you got that out, or I think somebody at one point said, well, maybe we should just, hang it up. But that was never said. That was always a rhetorical question, or it was never seriously considered that we would go our separate ways. We did go our separate ways temporarily. Doug could write a novel, or I could write a novel, or he could write a nonfiction book. But at all times, the dual joint careers were firing on all cylinders. If I was writing a book with Jeremy Logan, he was busy with a Pendergast book, or vice versa.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned Pendergast, because you read the book that came out last August, Bloodless, was the 20th that featured this particular character. For anybody who may not be aware, it's FBI agent Aloysius Pendergast, who is really one of the most iconic characters in thrillers. I don't even know how to describe him. He's almost, the thread of the character from the beginning has always been, I think the word you used was gothic, and I think that's the one word that would describe him, and where people could have that mental image of what that would look like, right? Did you ever envision having a character like that last this long? And I know you can't plan on those things. You clearly have to, they have to be successful, but did you ever think, well, we got another one in us. Hey, we're not done writing this guy yet. And then you mentioned earlier about killing off one of your characters. Did you ever think about killing? I know there's one of the books, that believe that he might be dead. Did you ever think about really killing him off? So those two questions.
Okay, sure. You know how many rock bands, small or large, say, "Oh, we never thought we'd make it past 2 or 3 years." We never thought that. We hoped we'd be writing until our dotage, but it's true. We never thought Pendergast would become our golden goose, or that we'd be happy with that. The way he, very briefly, how he got. Did I tell you how he became introduced in our last conversation?
I don't remember.
Okay, well, very briefly, Doug wrote a chapter early in Relic with two cops, two Irish New York cops. And I said to him, "Doug, these cops have to be different somehow. They're like Mutt and Jeff." He said very sarcastically, because he was still a bit tender at the time, to criticism. Like what? Some albino from New Orleans? And I said, well, why not? And that's partly tongue in cheek, because Pendergast is not an albino, but what he is, and as you pointed out, he's very unique and he's very eccentric. And I think that may have hurt us. That's one reason he stayed on the cutting room floor in a movie of Relic. That may be a reason we've had such bad luck trying to get series based on him. He's eccentric, and he's, we like that. Our readers like that too, and we hope people get him and enjoy him. But then we dropped him after Reliquary, and we went off and wrote these solo adventures, Riptide, Thunderhead. Admittedly, we brought some characters in from Relic into Thunderhead, but not Pendergast. And then we decided to write another Pendergast novel featuring Nora Kelly, who was in Thunderhead and has now got her own series, and Pendergast, and that was Cabinet of Curiosities. And at the time, we didn't think much of it. We thought, well, we love the Gothic atmosphere of Cabinet of Curiosities, Alienist, Time After Time, or Time and Again, whatever that book is called. That whole Gothic era of the past. How can we bring that into the New York of the present, where Pendergast is so out of place? So we wrote Cabinet, not thinking much about it. It's another book, book number 7 or whatever it was. And after we finished it, as I was doing my book tour, more and more booksellers said to me, you really got something this time. People are really, there's a buzz about this book, Cabinet. And sure enough, we said, what are we doing here? This guy is a great character. And that was around the time, I think, that authors began to more and more write series characters, for better or worse. In our case, I think it's better because it isn't the same guy doing the same thing. Pendergast walking into a town, killing all the bad guys, having sex with the girl and going on, or trying to remember his past where he was a superhero or something. It's every book is different. But we didn't have to recreate the characters each time from scratch. We could build on him and make a mystery out of his past. In Cabinet, for example, I'll make this brief. He's having what we call memory crossing. It's an intellectual journey into his own past, and he recreates his family's mansion. And I have him walking past the upstairs hallway, passing his brother's door. And I just, on a whim, I wrote in his brother's door, which had been sealed up, never to be opened again. I thought, let's see what they think about that, But I never thought it would be anything but a little grist for the mill, But that turned into Diogenes, his brother, which became a huge character in later books. So for us, looking back, it seems crazy that we didn't know right away, but back in the late 80s, he was so eccentric, and we didn't know he was gonna get the following he did until we read emails, and Cabinet was the proof that we needed to continue with him. and bring characters into his metaverse, his universe. They could leave and come back again, and it made it so rich for us, and that's really helped us. And we've tried to keep that rich and always new and different. And so anyway, that's much more than you wanted to know, but that's how it happened.
Well, I guess the other part of that was that did you ever, and what makes me think of this, I know the Easy Rollins character, the Walter Mosley made so famous, when he killed him off, he decided he wanted, to move on, and he wanted to kill him off, and there was an uproar. It was practically revolution. Have you ever considered that possibility? As you go through so many series and stories and characters, you ever think, that maybe we're done with this arc?
Well, I'll tell you what. Yes, there were maybe about 8 or 9 books back, Doug, who was always trying to push the boundary in a good way, think of new things we could do to surprise people, said, well, can we kill off somebody? Like, maybe, what if we kill off Pendergast? And I said, no, we can't do that, but he was, what do you call it when you're lurking? Is that the term when you're in a chat group or a forum and you're reading, and he anonymously put in a note saying, I hear that the boys are gonna kill off Margot Green, who is a heroine of Relic, and the comments we got were so frightening, we decided we better not, the top level characters, but we did kill off one very important guy from Relic and several Pendergast books that followed, simply because we felt he'd run his course, and also we gave him all of our best lines. And we sort of identified with him. And a book signing, people would say, why don't you get rid of that guy? He's so annoying, and so we felt personally affronted by that. So we thought, well, let's kill him off and make sure people know he's dead by showing the autopsy, so people will think if we kill off him, nobody's safe. That was really our goal, So it came short of what Mosley did, but it had repercussions that continue to this day. Why did you kill off X? How could you do that? That and a number of animals that die in our books, are the two things we hear most often.
Well, at least the readers are super invested in that person. That's got to be gratifying to some extent.
Yeah, it was. And, I can see why Conan Doyle killed off Holmes. He was sick of writing about it, but we love it. It's our bread and butter. And we feel that, it would be an interesting study to see how much Doyle actually made Holmes's backstory and how much of it was cobbled together by the Baker Street irregulars later on, when sort of forced into because I don't think he took a lot of time in that backstory, but that's what fascinates us in a Tolkien-like way almost, and we love teasing readers a bit more of Pendergast's backstory in each book, or putting him in new situations he hasn't been in before, in a cornfield in Kansas, in Florida. And so there's so much richness there for us to mine. Still, from our point of view, we're not going to get sick of it,
Right. Well, we've been talking a lot about the works that you do with Doug, but you've got a solo book coming out. Of course, you've had several of your books also be big hits as a solo author. Tell me about the new book. What is it about, and when will we see it?
It's called, and I don't think the name's going to change, it's called Chrysalis. It's coming out this summer, probably in July. I don't want to say too much about it, except that I was just disappointed to hear, this will be a massive hint, but I was disappointed by what I heard Mark Zuckerberg do in the last couple of months, because I've been plotting this thing for 5 years. And it's a somewhat similar topic, but my book is a lot more ambitious, and it takes the idea much farther initially. Good luck with him with his plans and all that. And it features my third character, Jeremy Logan, who is what I call an enigmologist, which just means in the old, turn of the century books, they had ghost breakers or supernatural sleuths. So he investigates mysteries that aren't just about ghosts of the occult, but they're problems that nobody else can answer, like the Loch Ness Monster, or the Curse of Citizen Kane, or whatever it might be, and less, actually, his books involve supernatural beings, or supposedly, and more, in this case, virtual reality. And what happens when it goes too far, or corporate greed, in my fiction, takes it in a way it wasn't expected to go. And he's brought in, most of my solo books take place in a large environment. Deep Storm took place, 2 miles under the sea, under a big dome. The Terminal Freeze took place out in this swamp, impassable swamp south of Egypt. And this one takes place in a huge corporate think tank, Skunkworks, out in the Connecticut mountains. So it took a long time to finish it. It was difficult work.
But look how timely it is. I mean, all that time that it took, and now with what's going on, it's probably seems like you came up with the idea a year ago, right?
Yeah, actually, probably 3 years ago. I mean, it has nothing to do with what Facebook is doing, except in the sense that it's virtual. It leverages that to commercial gain. But my second book, Deathmatch, was about a computer so powerful it could match people perfectly, find you the perfect mate. And now the idea, I hate to say it, it's almost passé, with Hinge and Tinder and everything else. But when that first came out, it wasn't. And I guess that's one danger of writing topical subjects.
Let me ask you also, because I know in the background there, I see your guitar. I know you play a lot of different instruments. Music is a big part of your life. Tell me a little bit about the impact that music has on your work as a writer.
That's a very good question. I grew up around music. My father was a bassoonist. My mother was a flautist, and I played guitar, piano, banjo, and it's influenced my life in lots of ways. I often think of writing a book as some combination of writing a concerto and a film score. I mean, a film score has various acts. A concerto has movements. And the standard sonata form has the first movement with a lot of variations and embellishments, and that's how I often see books. And also my interest in music, and as in so many other things, I try and put into my books, into our books. If it's I had one character who's a banjo player. I haven't had anybody who's a failed guitarist yet, like I am, but maybe sometime I will. But I really enjoy. I'm omnivore when it comes to reading any topic, science, most peculiar, obscure, and I love injecting that into the stories, whether it's a strange piece of music someone's listening to, or an obligato, part. And just like we enjoy putting our characters in areas they haven't been in before, like Thunderhead was an archaeological dig. Iceland was an engineering project in Antarctica, teaching people about these things. It's fun to, just like we use big words, 1 or 2 big words in all our books, because people first complained and now they thank us for it, and who knows, but it's just become one of our ticks. I can't help but if I find something interesting, I want to share it with or include it in our books. You know how? I'm sorry. You ever read a historical novel where you get the feeling that the writer says, "I spent 3 years researching this, and damn it, you're going to know everything that I know."
Right.
And that's not good. But I like saying, "Hey, I learned this fact. Did you know that hummingbirds are perpetually starving? They're starving all their lives." And I didn't know that, but it turned out to make a great metaphor for Pendergast to use in this next book that we're writing.
Well, see, Doug, Lincoln, that's one of them. Sorry, brain fart there. Forgive me. A lot of what I do with this presentation is, talking about process and that kind of thing. And I love how I hope people are paying attention to see how you take so many things that are just part of your life and you work them into these stories and you make them better, you make them richer, you make them more varied, more diverse, more interesting, more relatable in some ways, and more something that's be an achievement in other ways. I mean, I think that's what makes reading such a gift for us to read stories that are being told in this way. And I'm always fascinated by how writers find their voice when this giant jumble of information and ideas and good and bad and life experiences and everything else that we all have. How do you funnel all that down and find the voice that you that becomes your trademark as a writer? How did that process work for you? When did you feel like this is my voice? I am strong with this, and this is me.
Well, it's funny, the first couple of books, we were finding our feet, and it's probably easy to see what were Doug's chapters and what were mine. As things went on, our styles merged because I liked what he was doing, and I tried to imitate it, and he liked what I was doing. And people, I think, can probably still tell who wrote what. But I was working on getting a uniform style. I wasn't trying to hide my own voice, but I just liked the style we were writing. And I think, I drew on bits and pieces of writers I liked before, like Dickens, the way he could take a one-dimensional character and make you cry when he died. He was so one-dimensional, and H.P. Lovecraft for his slow buildup of horror despite all the purple prose, and I wrote a screenplay with Doug, which went nowhere, but I developed a real enjoyment for writing dialogue, and I worked really hard at that. And so now it's funny because when I write now, it's not effortless. It's not effortless at all. Doug is good at the action scenes. I give him as many of those as I can. I prefer to write the scenes of internal dialogue or description. In this new book that we're writing, a lot of it is set in New York City of the 19th century. And just having somebody from the 21st century go on the street, what do they smell? What do they see? And how do you get it across without making it obvious? You don't want the palimpsest or the bones of the set showing through. You know what I mean? And so I found my writing style becoming a little bit more rococo, writing those scenes just because it was set in an earlier time. Just as if I have two bad guys fighting, it'll be very brusque and short sentences and terse. So I try and write very visually, I try and make the chapters very short, visual, and make sure that readers want to get to the next one. And by the way, the one thing that I found out about New York that I thought would be interesting for people today, and that they wouldn't think was part of New York, was how light it was. No tall buildings. And so you could look down Fifth Avenue, and there be no shadows, no canyons. And it was fun to integrate that into the story. And a lot of research, but you spend 5 hours researching and 4 hours cutting out the research parts that don't help add to the story. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
oh no, it totally does. It totally does. Well, look, we're almost out of time here, so I like to end on what I hope is a fun question. I mean for it to be a fun question. So it's a little esoteric, but I ask everybody a variation of this question. So let me hit you up now too. Let's just say I had the power to put you together for dinner or a drink or a conversation with one of the following 3 people. Who would you choose, and tell me why? And the options I'm going to give you are Mary Shelley, who of course wrote Frankenstein, Leo Fender, the great inventor of the Fender Stratocaster and Telecaster, or famed FBI mind hunter John Douglas. I can put you together with one of those 3 people. Who would you choose and why?
Before I answer, let me ask, do you tailor that question to the people you talk to?
A little bit, yeah. I try to find, what I try to do? I try to find a broad thing, a broad spectrum of things you might be interested in, so it's not an easy question to answer. So you have to really think about it. If it was all just one thing, probably be easier than if, I've just touched on 2 or 3 interests there.
Okay, well, that's an easy one for me. But I have to tell you why the other 2 are not appropriate. First, I don't think I had much to say to Mary Shelley. I wouldn't know how to converse with her, make small talk of that era. I could tell her how much I like Byron, and the circle she hung around with. But she may not like the reasons that I like Frankenstein, the modern Prometheus. She might not. And I think that would be an awkward conversation. As for the Mind Hunter, I admire him very much, but I know several people in 3-letter agencies, who've helped me just in various very indirect ways with tradecraft and totally, nothing secret, but just with how do you say this, what's on the car dashboard, things like that. And so I think I'd have 2 or 3 questions to ask him, like, how do you think of these things, and who was the worst guy or the most difficult case? But then, I feel like he couldn't add it. It would just be me praising him for what a great guy he was and how much he changed, investigative. But with Fender, I'd love to talk to him about that log he created, or is that Les Paul? Les Paul. But I love to talk to him about amplifiers and guitars and who his favorite musicians were, and how he frets, B minor ninth, and what does he think of power chords? And I just, I'm always more at ease talking with people who I have nothing in common with, because I can, for some reason, I can find most common ground with them. Mary Shelley is a novelist. The Mindhunter, I've forgotten his name, is in investigation. I am in a fictive sense. Leo Fender must be a very interesting person, just in a million ways,
Yeah. Well, Lincoln, thank you so much for joining us here today. For those of you who are viewing this or listening to it on a podcast, I hope you're getting as much out of this as I am, whether you want to be an author or not. Lincoln, you're a fascinating conversation to have. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, please do. I have these conversations with writers all the time. I am deeply indebted to them for sharing their insights and their thoughts and wisdom about this business and their work. I cannot thank you enough. I really, really appreciate it. I love the books. I cannot wait to read the Nora Kelly book. And I can't wait to see your new solo book in the summer. I am going to be keeping an eye out because I love that. I love that topic as well.
I want to thank you, Rich, and also to thank your listeners and your watchers and everybody who tunes in, because people who read books and like stories, and they're always keeping a culture alive, I think. So, and you're doing the same through your work. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. And again, join me next time on the open mic. Until then, please be safe, be smart, and be kind to one another. Take care.